Welcome. Welcome to what I hope will be the last of these panel discussions about Escambia County as relates to the school-to-prison pipeline. This series of programs have been sponsored and contributed to by a number of different organizations. One is the League of Women Voters, of which I'm a member. One is also the Escambia County Youth Justice Coalition, which is a local group. We're also some of these have been sponsored by the ACLU, the Coffee Party, the Southern Party Law Center, and we also co-sponsored with the National Association of Social Workers to present a documentary called Paper Tigers. All of these organizations, by the way, are issue-oriented and not partisan. None of these organizations promotes a particular political party or a platform or a political candidate. The individual members of these organizations are free to do as they choose, vote, support, whatnot. But as an organization, the League and the other organizations do not support any particular political party. First, a bit of housekeeping. I hope you've all signed in. If I already have your email address, I probably don't need that again, but I do need you to sign in, please. The sign-in table was back there, but we will have sheets if you're going around. It says I'm not using the microphone. I hear the echo. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, good. The majority of our time tonight will be spent in having our panel answer questions from the audience. So you all were given cards when you came in. Please write questions, comments, things that you want to have covered on these, and we will have people circulating around to pick them up. And this, toward the end of the program, the moderator will have these, and she will read all the questions and comments. There can't be any question or comment that refers directly to a particular student or a particular event, just for reasons of privacy. So don't ask us to do that, but if you have questions in general, please write them down. The moderator will read them so everyone can hear them, and then they will be answered by our panelists up here. If during the meeting you need to get up and move around, get more coffee or whatever, please do so quietly. If you have a cell phone or any sort of electronic device, please put it on mute right now. The restrooms are just outside the door, and I forget now whether it's left or right, but if you walk out that door, you will see them. And now I'll introduce myself. I'm Paula Montgomery. My current position is the Education Chair for the League of Women Voters of the Pensacola Bay area. We have a number of committees in the League. We have one that's concerned with the environment. It takes on activities in that arena. We have education, of course, which is what we are tonight. But we also have voter services where we sign people up to vote, register them to vote, and we also give out information about the candidates before each election. Not our opinions, but we send them questions, they answer the questions, and we publish what they say. The League takes positions on issues that they study, and this is part of a study. We are doing what is called the school-to-prison pipeline and its consequences for the community and for the students and for the schools. And I'd like to start with a little history lesson. This history is based largely on a white paper brief issued by the Center on Youth Justice in 2013. And not entirely, but almost entirely from that white paper. It shows how we arrived at an increasingly rigid system of discipline in our nation's schools. It wasn't looking just at Florida, it was looking at the whole nation. And how inflexible rules were made, which removed discretion from school administrators and even from law enforcement about what happens when a child misbehaves. And by most of these rules, first offenses were mandated to be harshly punished. So how did we get to such a rigid situation? The changes began in the mid-1980s. There were rising rates of juvenile arrest for violent crimes, which actually peaked and began to decline before all these rules were put into place. But people were frightened. They thought that young people were dangerous. And so as a response to this, the Congress enacted something called the Gun-Free Schools Act in 1994. In order to get federal funds, the schools then had to require expulsion for at least a year of any student who brings any weapon into the schools. Now, that weapon could be a plastic bread knife that the student's mother had stuck in the lunchbox. It was anything that could be construed as a weapon. No questions, no discretion, expulsion for 1 year. That was 1994. Things have changed since then, I'll tell you, but nonetheless, that was 1994. Other punishments, these punishments were meant to be entirely just for bringing a weapon into the school and not for other less serious infractions. At about that same time, like 1994, we had wall-to-wall media coverage of the horrible murders of the parents by the Menendez brothers in California. You may remember that. That was very sensational, and it ramped up the fear that people had of young people. There was a political scientist who fed right into this. His name was John DeLulio, and he predicted a coming wave of super predators, young people with no morals, no pity, who were killing for fun and profit. Fear was being revved up, even though the peak of juvenile arrest had already passed. Of course, school systems and everybody else wanted our students and our teachers to be safe. And so the result of this fear was this increasingly rigid system of discipline, backed by increased federal funding for additional police officers in the schools. The result of this harshness was that more kids had their educations interrupted due to discipline, and way too many kids ended up with a criminal record of some sort. That's how it began 20 years ago. And by the way, we have yet to see that wave of super predators that were predicted. If a child, for example, in some accidental or in deliberate way strikes a teacher, this child can be arrested for battery. And that arrest results in a felony conviction. And you have to know what happens to a felon. If they are living with a family in subsidized housing, then either the family has to kick the child out or else they have to move out, because you can't receive any sort of government subsidy if you are a felon or if you're harboring a felon. They're not eligible for food stamps or any government subsidy. So the consequences of what may be a deliberate or it may be an accidental act could be quite severe and follow that child for the rest of his or her life. Now, I want to jump to 2013, give or take a year. The American Bar Association got very upset about the number of kids that were ending up in courts. They were worried about the unintended consequences of children being arrested for fairly minor infractions. And the Texas Bar Association had a forum in Dallas, Texas at about that time that I read about. And that was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase school to prison pipeline. And when I read about that, it was the first time I was aware of this problem. And so it was when I began to ask questions about what's happening here in Escambia County. How are we doing? Well, how are we doing? I adopted the expression school to prison pipeline because that is what is used nationally. I do not mean to accuse or denigrate anyone by using that title. It's just, it's the title that someone else chose and is being used nationwide. So, after I read about that forum, I wanted to see what was happening here in Escambia County. This is where I live, where 4 of my grandchildren are in public schools. And so I made some original inquiries, and I got together a committee. And that committee has worked hard in putting together these public information forums that we're seeing, I hope, the fourth and final one tonight. Our desire was to learn what's happening for us and for the public. How does it all work? What parts are working well? What parts could use some correction? And what can we as citizens do to help make things better? The School to Prison Pipeline Committee is comprised of myself from the League of Women Voters, Ray Hudkins from the Coffee Party. Ray, wave your hand. There's Ray. Shirley Lewis Brown of the Escambia Youth Justice Coalition. There's Shirley. Keontae Humphreys, and I haven't seen her come in. She's with the ACLU and formerly was with the Southern Poverty Law Center. And Lisa Nelson Laura, who is the executive editor for the Pensacola News Journal. Together, this hardworking committee has put together all these panel discussions looking at the system. Not individuals within the system, but the system, how it's working, what's going on. Because there is a troubling trend, or not a trend, but there are some troubling things about it. It seems not to always be producing the desired results for the kids, for the schools, for the teachers. So, and this system doesn't just include the schools, it includes law enforcement, the judicial system, as well as the schools. This system was put together by well-meaning people who wanted safety, and I understand that. If there are parts of it that aren't working, well-meaning people should be able to correct that. So, in our panels, we've heard from judges, prosecutors, defenders, police, and sheriff's department officials. We've learned a lot. Tonight, I look forward to hearing from the school and see what is being done to reverse the trend that did not have the intended result and has proved to have unfortunate, unintended consequences in many cases. I want you to write questions as you're listening to the panel, as you're listening to me, as you're listening to Mr. Marcanio. Write your questions down, and as soon as we get through hearing from the panel, then we will be picking up, there'll be people circulating around who will pick up the questions. The moderator will then read the questions or comments, if you have a comment you want to make. The questions and comments will be read from up here so everyone can hear them, and then they will be answered by the panel. So get your cards ready. It's now my pleasure in just a second to introduce Mr. Steve Marcanio, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction of the Escambia County Schools. He will speak and then he'll introduce the panel. After he speaks, the program will be turned over to Lisa Nelson Laura, the Executive Editor of the Pensacola News Journal, who will moderate the question and answer period. And now, Mr. Marcanio, thank you.